Welcome to Breaking International News. Countries ready to supply Iran with nuclear weapons. The U.S. had warned Iran about the attack in advance. U.S. trying to reach out to Iran. After the U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, Trump stabbed by Russian security official. Israel strikes military targets across Iran. Trump made the same mistake as Bush in the Middle East 2 decades ago. Operation Midnight Hammer, 25-minute historic military operation. Countries ready to supply Iran with nuclear weapons. Following the U.S. military strike on Iran, former Russian president and deputy head of the Security Council Dmitry Medvedev has claimed that some countries are ready to directly supply nuclear weapons to Tehran. He made the comments in a post on X, formerly Twitter, on Sunday. Medvedev said, "The U.S. attacks on Iranian facilities in Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordow have achieved the exact opposite of what Trump said they would. As a result of these attacks, the path to enriching nuclear material and, one might say, producing nuclear weapons in Iran has become easier." He also said that several countries are now ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. Medvedev claimed that Iran's political leadership has become stronger after the U.S. strike. Those who previously held neutral or hostile attitudes towards the government are now uniting around the country's spiritual leadership. Meanwhile, the Russian Foreign Ministry in a statement strongly condemned the U.S. attack, saying that launching missiles and bombs on the territory of a sovereign state is a gross violation of international law, the UN Charter, and the decisions of the UN Security Council. The statement also said that we demand an end to this aggression and call on the relevant parties to return to political and diplomatic methods. The U.S. had warned Iran about the attack in advance. Washington had secretly warned Tehran before the U.S. airstrikes on Iran. The U.S. took such steps to avoid a full-scale war, claims the Middle East-based media outlet Amwaj Media. This information was revealed in a report published by TRT Global on Sunday, June 22. According to the media outlet, before launching a devastating airstrike on Iran's 3 main nuclear facilities at midnight on Saturday, June 21, the U.S. informed Tehran that the attack would only target the Fordow, Isfahan, and Natanz facilities, and that the U.S. did not want to engage in a full-scale military conflict. The report shows that a senior Iranian political source, speaking to Amwaj Media on condition of anonymity, said that Iranian officials immediately took action after this warning. Most of the enriched uranium from the nuclear sites was removed to a secret location. As a result, Iran was partially saved from the threat of major damage. However, neither the United States nor Iran has officially confirmed the authenticity of this information. Meanwhile, the UK government was also informed about the attack before the attack, said Jonathan Reynolds, the country's Trade and Commerce Minister. This suggests that the attack was a pre-planned and coordinated military action with international allies. The report said that 3 US B-2 bombers dropped 613.6 kilograms massive ordnance penetrator (MOP) bombs on the Fordow nuclear facility. 2 of them hit the site's 2 protected entrances, and 2 bombs were dropped on ventilation ducts. In addition, 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired from a U.S. submarine at the Natanz and Isfahan nuclear facilities. The report mentioned that Israeli forces had previously attacked these 2 facilities. Fox News quoted a U.S. official as saying, "Everyone was talking about Fordow, but in fact the most difficult target was Isfahan." From this comment, it can be assumed that the operation was not just symbolic, but that it involved complex planning and priority target calculations. U.S. President Donald Trump said, "We have completely destroyed Iran's nuclear facilities. If there is an attack in the future, it will be even more terrible." On the other hand, Iran has strongly condemned the attack, calling it a violation of international law. The country's nuclear authorities said that it is preparing to take legal action in this incident. Earlier, Tehran accused the UN nuclear watchdog IAEA of hiding the truth about Iran's nuclear program. According to analysts, in addition to military tensions, a kind of diplomatic signal exchange is being observed through this incident. Sending advance messages, limiting targets, and Iran's preparations all indicate that the diplomatic lines of communication between the 2 sides have not yet been completely severed. U.S. trying to reach out to Iran. After the U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, Washington is sending messages through both public and private channels to re-establish diplomatic relations with the country and create an environment for talks. This information was given by U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. CNN reports. At a press conference held at the Pentagon on Sunday, June 22, Hegseth said, I can only confirm that messages are being sent to Iran through multiple channels, both public and private, so that they have the maximum opportunity to come to the negotiating table. He also said, they, Iranian authorities, clearly know what the U.S. wants and what kind of steps they should take for peace. We are hopeful that they will seize this opportunity. CNN reported that 5 rounds of nuclear talks have been held between the U.S. and Iran since April this year. The talks were led by U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. However, after Israel's unprecedented attack last week, the 6th round of talks scheduled for June 22 was cancelled. CNN reported that President Donald Trump decided to launch airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities after this stalemate. According to analysts, the United States has now adopted a simultaneous strategy of dialogue and pressure. That is, on the one hand, they are trying to pull Iran towards diplomacy, and on the other hand, they are trying to create a favorable position in the negotiations by creating military pressure. There has been no direct public response from Iran to the U.S. call yet. However, political sources close to the country have indicated that the key now is not unconditional negotiations, but rather creating an environment of trust. They believe that before returning to diplomatic negotiations, the United States must show a credible position and explain its past breaches of promises. Trump stabbed by Russian security official. The United States has directly engaged in military action amid Iran-Israel tensions in the Middle East. At midnight on Saturday, June 21, local time, a US B-2 bomber attacked 3 high-security nuclear facilities in Iran. Trump mentioned in his speech that the attack was being carried out in coordination with Israel. In response to the attack, Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman and former President Dmitry Medvedev criticized U.S. President Donald Trump, saying that Trump himself had pushed the United States into a new war, Al Jazeera reported. On Sunday, June 22, Medvedev wrote in a post on the social media X, formerly Twitter, targeting Trump, saying that Trump, who calls himself a peacemaker, has now started a new war. He said, "What did the United States actually achieve by attacking 3 Iranian nuclear facilities? There was no major damage to those Iranian installations. Just the beginning of a new war." Medvedev also wrote that after such a success, Trump can now completely abandon the thought of the Nobel Peace Prize. Congratulations for this great start, Mr. President. Incidentally, just a few days ago, Trump claimed himself as a worthy candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize. He said that his role in establishing world peace is unique. Even the Pakistani government decided to officially recommend his name for the Nobel Peace Prize. According to analysts, such comments by Russia are not just diplomatic sarcasm, but a kind of strategic message to U.S. Middle East policy. Moscow wants to clearly show that Washington is not walking on the path of peace, but rather on the path of aggression. Israel strikes military targets across Iran. The Israeli Defense Forces said they had struck dozens of military targets across Iran. The Israeli military carried out the attack on Iran after U.S. airstrikes on 3 nuclear facilities earlier. The Israeli Air Force said that 30 warplanes had struck dozens of military targets across Iran this morning. More than 60 warheads or bombs were used in the attack. They said that the first round of strikes targeted a strategic missile headquarters in the Yazd region. Then, attacks were carried out on military facilities in Isfahan, Bushehr, and Awaz. It is worth noting that U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the U.S. had destroyed Iran's nuclear programs in Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan in the nighttime bombings. Trump made the same mistake as Bush in the Middle East. 2 decades ago, former U.S. President George W. Bush imposed war on Iraq with a poisonous mixture of confidence and aggression. At that time, it was said that it would be a sudden operation. The mission would be completed in a few days, democracy would be established. But in reality, an endless war was born, which consumed the lives of millions of people. The entire region collapsed. U.S. President Donald Trump has started following the same path again. The same confidence, the same aggressive diplomacy, and the same blindness, only the actors have changed. The military action that Trump has taken against Iran, standing by Israel, is pushing not only U.S. foreign policy, but the entire Middle East towards an unstable, bloody future. Yet Trump himself called Bush's war a terrible mistake. Today, he has chosen that wrong path again. The Washington Post. In 2016, Trump said during the election campaign, the United States Middle East wars were a terrible mistake. He also said at the 2020 and 2024 election rallies, the United States will prevent World War III and focus on repairing its own house, not foreign countries. However, now he is dragging the United States into the Iran-Israel conflict. According to analysts, this could not only fail the diplomatic progress of the Trump administration, but also create the fear of starting another long-term conflict in the Middle East, for which the Americans will also have to pay the price. Two prominent analysts from two different political ideologies, progressive Matthew Doss and conservative editor Sohrab Ahmari, have simultaneously expressed concern about this situation. They have clearly stated that the path of diplomacy and peace talks should be taken at this time, not war. They have called it not only a political mistake, but also a suicidal decision against the interests of the United States. Public opinion surrounding this war is also against Trump. A recent poll found that only 16% of Americans support the war. On the other hand, 60% are outright opposed to it. Even more than half of Republican voters want the United States to stay out of the conflict. More importantly, this anti-war stance is not limited to progressives. Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as well as Trump's own supporters such as Josh Hawley, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, and Charlie Kirk, have all spoken out against it. Some hardline Pentagon officials have said that they can slam Iran with a single blow by attacking Iran's fordown nuclear facilities. But analysts say that's a misconception. The facility is located deep in the mountains, and it will be impossible to assess the extent of the damage until it is inspected in person. On the other hand, Iran will not remain silent. They could close the Strait of Hormuz, which carries about 20% of the world's oil. In addition, analysts believe that they could retaliate against U.S. bases in the Middle East. And the United States would then respond. This reaction and the series of strikes would start another long-term war. In 2003, George W. Bush invaded Iraq, embroiling the United States in a long and costly war in the Middle East. The goal was to destroy weapons of mass destruction and change the regime. The result was millions of lives lost, a refugee crisis, and the fragility of the entire Middle East. The United States made a wrong decision by ignoring the real context of the war, evidence, and diplomatic options, which is still marked as a dark chapter in world politics. Operation Midnight Hammer, 25-minute, historic, military operation. After much speculation, the United States has suddenly joined the ongoing Israeli aggression in Iran. On Saturday night, they attacked 3 Iranian nuclear facilities simultaneously. This military operation has been officially named Operation Midnight Hammer. 125 U.S. warplanes took part in this operation that lasted about 25 minutes. 7 B-2 bombers took off from Missouri in the United States and flew for about 37 hours in Operation Midnight Hammer. These planes dropped 14 bunker buster bombs on Iran's Fordo and Natanz nuclear facilities. At the same time, the United States launched about 24 Tomahawk missiles from a submarine at another nuclear facility in Isfahan. Israel has been seeking U.S. help from the beginning to stop Iran's nuclear activities. Because Israel did not have the weapons to attack the Fordo nuclear facility located far underground. Since then, discussions about the U.S. B-2 bomber have begun. Military analysts said that only the U.S. B-2 bomber could have damaged the Fordo nuclear facility. In the end, that is what the U.S. did. A senior official in the country said that this was the largest operation in U.S. history using the B-2 bomber. After the operation, U.S. President Donald Trump described it as an incredible success. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also claimed that Iran's nuclear program was destroyed through this operation. However, Iran has not yet officially reported any damage. The country's Red Crescent said that there were no casualties in Iran in last night's attack. According to some unconfirmed sources, Iran has already removed everything important from the much-discussed Fordo base due to fear of an attack.